Tom worked as a mechanic at the local auto shop, getting his hands dirty every day to provide for his family. He wasn't rich, but he made enough to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Every evening he'd come home covered in grease and oil, but his face would light up the moment he saw his 8-year-old daughter Lily running toward him with open arms. "Daddy's home," she would shout, not caring one bit about his dirty work clothes. Tom would scoop her up and spin her around, making her giggle until she was breathless. These were the moments that made all the long days worth it. His wife Jessica would watch from the kitchen doorway, and for years Tom thought she was smiling because she was happy. He didn't know that behind that smile, something dark was growing, something that would soon destroy everything he held dear. Tom and Jessica had been married for 10 years. They met at a friend's birthday party when they were both young and full of dreams. Jessica was beautiful and charming, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it. Tom felt like the luckiest guy in the world when she said yes to his proposal. The first few years of marriage were good. They bought a small house on Maple Street, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. When Lily was born, Tom thought his heart might burst with joy. He would sit by her crib for hours just watching her sleep, promising her silently that he would always protect her and give her the best life possible. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Jessica began complaining about money more often. She wanted a bigger house, a newer car, designer clothes like her friends had. Tom worked overtime whenever he could, but it never seemed to be enough. He started noticing that Jessica was spending a lot of time on her phone, always texting someone or scrolling through social media. "Who are you always talking to?" Tom would ask casually. "Just friends," Jessica would reply, quickly putting her phone away. "Nothing important?" Tom trusted his wife. He had no reason not to. If Jessica said it was nothing, then it was nothing. He was busy with work and focused on being a good father to Lily. He didn't have time to worry about who his wife was texting. What Tom didn't know was that Jessica had discovered online gambling. It started small, just a few dollars here and there on some casino websites. But gambling is like a disease that spreads quietly until it takes over everything. Jessica began spending hours every day placing bets, chasing losses with bigger bets, always convinced that the next one would be the big win that would solve all their problems. She became good at hiding it. She would gamble while Tom was at work and Lily was at school. She learned to clear her browser history and delete apps before anyone could see them. When bills started arriving that didn't make sense, she would intercept the mail and hide the statements. Tom began noticing small things. Their savings account seemed to be going down instead of up, even though he was putting money in every month. When he asked Jessica about it, she would give him reasonable explanations. The water heater needed repairs. Lily needed new clothes. For school, there was an unexpected medical bill. Tom believed her because he wanted to believe her. The truth was that Jessica had already blown through their entire savings account. She had opened credit cards in both their names and maxed them out. She had even taken out a loan against their house without telling Tom. In just 2 years, she had destroyed their financial security and buried them in debt that would take decades to pay off. But the gambling wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Jessica had started blaming Tom for everything that was going wrong in her life. In her mind, if he just made more money, she wouldn't need to gamble. If he was a better husband, she wouldn't feel so unhappy. If he was smarter, he would find a way to fix their problems. Jessica began picking fights over little things. She would criticize the way Tom ate his dinner, complain that he was too tired to talk after work, or get angry when he wanted to spend time with Lily instead of focusing on her. Tom tried to be patient. He thought Jessica was just stressed about money, and he blamed himself for not being able to provide better for his family. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. Tom had stopped by the bank to deposit his paycheck and decided to check their savings account balance. The number on the screen made his blood run cold. They had less than $50 left in an account that should have had thousands. Tom drove home in a daze, his mind racing. There had to be some mistake. Maybe the bank's computer system was down, or maybe he was looking at the wrong account, but deep down he knew something was very wrong. When he walked into the house, Jessica was in the living room with her laptop, and Tom could see the colorful graphics of a casino website on the screen. Everything suddenly made sense. The mysterious phone calls, the missing money, the constant stress about finances. "Jessica," Tom said quietly, "we need to talk." Jessica slammed the laptop shut and turned to face him. "What about?" "I went to the bank today. Our savings account is almost empty, and I just saw what you were doing on your computer." For a moment, Jessica's face went pale. Tom thought she might break down and confess everything, that they could work together to fix this problem. Instead, her expression hardened into something he had never seen before. "You're spying on me now?" she snapped. "Going through my computer, checking up on me like I'm a child?" "Jessica, you've been gambling away our money. We need to get you help." "Help?" Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The only help I need is a husband who can actually provide for his family instead of working some dead-end job and making me feel trapped in this house." Tom felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "I work 60 hours a week to provide for this family. I've never asked you to work because you said you wanted to stay home with Lily. Maybe I should have married someone with ambition instead of settling for a grease monkey who can't even keep track of his own bank account." The words hit Tom like physical blows. This wasn't the woman he had married, the woman he had loved for 10 years. This was someone else entirely, someone cruel and angry and looking for someone to blame for her own mistakes. "We can fix this," Tom said desperately. "There are programs for people with gambling problems. We can get counseling, work out a payment, plan for the debts." Jessica stared at him for a long moment, and Tom could see something calculating in her eyes. "You want to know what the real problem is, Tom? It's you. It's always been you." That night, Jessica packed a bag and left with Lily, claiming she needed to stay at her mother's house to think things through. Tom barely slept, staring at the ceiling and wondering how his life had fallen apart so quickly. He had no idea that Jessica was already 3 steps ahead of him, planning something that would destroy not just their marriage, but his entire life. The next morning, a police officer knocked on Tom's door with papers that would change everything. Jessica had filed for a restraining order, claiming that Tom was violent and dangerous. According to the documents, he had been abusing her and Lily for years, and she feared for their safety. Tom read the papers with shaking hands, unable to believe what he was seeing. The woman he loved, the mother of his child, had accused him of the most horrible things imaginable. And now, by law, he couldn't go anywhere near his own daughter. His perfect family hadn't just fallen apart. It had been deliberately destroyed by the person he trusted most in the world. Tom sat in his empty house staring at the restraining order papers for the 100th time. The words on the page seemed impossible to believe. According to Jessica, he had been hitting her and Lily for years. She claimed he had anger problems, that he would explode over small things and become violent. She even said that Lily was afraid to be alone with him. None of it was true, but the paper in his hands made it official. The court believed Jessica's story, and now Tom couldn't go within 500 feet of his own wife and daughter. He couldn't go to Lily's school, couldn't drive past Jessica's mother's house where they were staying, couldn't even call to say goodnight to his little girl. The first few days were the hardest. Tom would wake up expecting to hear Lily's footsteps running down the hallway, only to remember that she wasn't there. He would make coffee for 2 out of habit, then pour the extra cup down the drain. The house felt like a tomb, full of memories, but empty of life. Tom's phone started ringing constantly. First, it was his mother-in-law, Ruth, screaming at him about how she always knew he was no good. Then it was Jessica's sister, calling him every name in the book and threatening to make sure everyone in town knew what kind of monster he was. Even his own brother called, asking carefully if the accusations might be true. "You know me, Danny," Tom said to his brother over the phone. "Have you ever seen me lose my temper? Have you ever seen me hurt anyone?" There was a long pause. "No, but people can be different behind closed doors. And Jessica seems really scared, Tom. She's got pictures." "Pictures?" Tom's heart sank. What kind of pictures could Jessica possibly have? He had never laid a hand on her or Lily in anger. He had never even raised his voice at his daughter. But apparently Jessica had evidence that convinced everyone, including the courts. What Tom didn't know was that Jessica had been planning this for weeks. Once she realized that Tom had discovered her gambling problem, she knew she needed to act fast. She couldn't let him expose her addiction or force her into treatment. She needed to be the victim, not the villain. Jessica had always been smart and creative, but now she was using those skills for something dark. She started by taking photos of bruises on her arms and face, but the bruises weren't from Tom. Jessica had given them to herself, pinching and hitting her own skin until dark marks appeared. She would take the photos with her phone, making sure the timestamp showed recent dates. The hardest part was making the bruises look realistic. Jessica spent hours researching online, learning about different types of injuries and how they appeared on camera. She practiced expressions of fear and pain in the mirror. She even learned how to make her voice sound shaky and scared when she talked to people about Tom. But the photos were just the beginning. Jessica also started recording voice messages and phone calls, but she would edit them carefully. She would record Tom saying normal things like, "I'm really frustrated," or "This is driving me crazy," when he was talking about work problems. Then she would save just those parts, making it sound like he was threatening her. She kept a fake diary, writing entries about Tom's supposed violent outbursts. She made up detailed stories about him throwing things, grabbing her roughly, and making threats. She even wrote about how Lily would cry and hide in her room when Daddy got angry. Every entry was dated and written in her neat handwriting, creating what looked like years of documented abuse. The most evil part of Jessica's plan involved Lily herself. Jessica began slowly poisoning her daughter's mind against her father. It started with small comments that seemed innocent enough. "Daddy seemed really angry today, didn't he?" Jessica would say, after Tom had a normal conversation about bills or work stress. "Did you notice how Daddy raised his voice? That scared Mommy a little bit." Sometimes grown-ups have problems that make them act mean, even when they don't want to. At first, Lily would defend her father. "Daddy's not mean, Mommy. He's the nicest daddy in the world." But Jessica was patient and persistent. She would show Lily the fake bruises and claim that Daddy had hurt her. She would cry in front of her daughter, making Lily feel like she needed to protect her mother. She would tell Lily that they had to keep secrets from Daddy because he might get angry if he knew they were talking about his problem. "You love Mommy, don't you?" Jessica would ask. "Then you have to help Mommy stay safe." Slowly, Lily began to change. She started flinching when Jessica mentioned Tom's name. She would ask worried questions about whether Daddy was going to hurt them. Jessica would comfort her and praise her for being such a good, caring daughter. Without realizing it, Lily was being trained to fear the father who had never done anything but love her. Meanwhile, Jessica was busy spreading her story throughout their community. She called Tom's workplace and spoke to his boss, claiming she was worried about Tom's anger issues affecting his job performance. She talked to the neighbors, telling them tearfully about the abuse she had been hiding for years. She even contacted Lily's teacher, expressing concern about how the domestic situation might be affecting her daughter's behavior at school. Jessica was a gifted actress, and she played the role of the terrified, battered wife perfectly. She would break down crying at just the right moments. She would show people the fake bruises and flinch when anyone made sudden movements. She would talk about how she had tried to make the marriage work for Lily's sake, but she just couldn't take the abuse anymore. People believed her because she seemed so genuine. Who would fake something like that? Who would lie about domestic violence? Jessica was counting on people's natural sympathy for victims and their reluctance to question a woman's claims about abuse. The rumor mill in their small town began churning. People who had known Tom for years started looking at him differently. Parents at Lily's school would stop talking when he drove by. Customers at the auto shop began asking for different mechanics. Even the mailman seemed nervous when he had to deliver packages to Tom's house. Tom tried to defend himself, but everything he said seemed to make things worse. When he told people that Jessica had a gambling problem, they assumed he was trying to deflect blame. When he insisted that he had never hurt anyone, people thought he was in denial. When he got emotional talking about missing his daughter, some people saw it as proof that he had anger issues. The legal system was designed to protect women and children from domestic violence, which was generally a good thing. But in Tom's case, that same system was being weaponized against him. Jessica's lawyer was experienced in domestic violence cases and knew exactly how to present the evidence in the most damaging way possible. Tom hired the best lawyer he could afford, but legal fees were expensive, and he was already struggling financially because of Jessica's gambling debts. His lawyer explained that domestic violence cases were difficult to defend because they often came down to one person's word against another's. The fact that Jessica had photos, recordings, and a documented history made Tom's situation even more challenging. The burden of proof is supposed to be on the accuser, Tom's lawyer explained. But in reality, you're going to have to prove that you didn't do these things. That's almost impossible. As weeks turned into months, Tom watched helplessly as his life fell apart piece by piece. He lost some customers at work because people didn't feel comfortable around him. Some of his friends stopped calling. Even his own family members seemed unsure of what to believe. The worst part was not being able to see Lily. Tom would drive by her school sometimes, just hoping to catch a glimpse of his daughter playing at recess. He would see her laughing with her friends, looking happy and healthy, and his heart would break all over again. She looked so small and far away, like she was already forgetting about the father who used to read her bedtime stories every night. Tom began to understand that this wasn't just about a divorce or a custody battle. Jessica wasn't just trying to leave him. She was trying to destroy him completely. She wanted to make sure that he lost everything: his daughter, his reputation, his friends, his livelihood, and his future. And the most terrifying part was that her plan was working. The knock on Tom's door came early on a Thursday morning. He was getting ready for work when he saw the official car parked outside his house. His stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. Child Protective Services had arrived to investigate Jessica's claims. The social worker was a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Patterson, who carried a thick folder and wore a serious expression. She introduced herself politely but kept her distance, as if Tom might be dangerous. He invited her in, but she seemed uncomfortable sitting in his living room, looking around like she was searching for signs of violence. "Mr. Tom, we've received some concerning reports about your behavior toward your wife and daughter," she began, consulting her notes. "These are serious allegations, and we have to investigate every claim thoroughly." Tom's hands were shaking as he tried to explain his side of the story. He told Mrs. Patterson about Jessica's gambling problem, about how she had drained their savings account, about how none of her accusations were true, but he could see in her eyes that she had already heard this kind of denial before. To her, he probably sounded like every other abusive husband who claimed innocence. Mrs. Patterson walked through his house, taking notes about everything. She looked in closets, checked the refrigerator, examined Lily's bedroom. Tom watched her write things down and wondered what she was thinking. Was she looking for weapons? Signs of violence? Evidence that a child lived here happily? "Your wife has provided us with some documentation," Mrs. Patterson said carefully. "Photos, diary entries, voice recordings. She also says that your daughter has been showing signs of anxiety and fear when your name is mentioned." Tom felt like the walls were closing in around him. "Can I see these photos? Can I hear these recordings? I have a right to know what I'm being accused of." "That's part of the legal process, Mr. Tom. Right now, we're just trying to assess the safety of the child." After Mrs. Patterson left, Tom sat alone in his house and cried for the first time since this nightmare began. He wasn't just fighting Jessica anymore. He was fighting an entire system that was designed to believe her and doubt him. Every professional involved in this case, the social workers, the lawyers, the judges, had seen real cases of abuse. They had seen children who were genuinely in danger. How could they tell the difference between a real victim and a fake one? Meanwhile, Jessica was busy building her case even stronger. She had taken Lily to a child psychologist, claiming that her daughter was showing signs of trauma from witnessing domestic violence. The psychologist, Dr. Morrison, was a kind woman who specialized in helping children cope with difficult family situations. Lily seems like a sweet child, Dr. Morrison told Jessica after their first session. But she does appear to have some anxiety when we talk about family dynamics. What Dr. Morrison didn't know was that Jessica had been coaching Lily for weeks before this appointment. She had taught her daughter exactly what to say and how to act. Jessica would practice conversations with Lily, rewarding her when she gave the right answers and gently correcting her when she didn't. Remember, sweetie, when the nice doctor asks about Daddy, you should tell her how you feel when he gets angry, Jessica would say. But Daddy doesn't get angry, Mommy. Sometimes he does, honey. Remember when he was upset about the bills? Remember how loud his voice got? That made you feel scared, didn't it? Lily was only 8 years old. She loved both her parents and wanted to make them happy. When Mommy seemed sad and scared, Lily wanted to help. When Mommy told her that certain answers would keep them both safe, Lily tried her best to give those answers. During the psychological evaluation, Lily would hesitate before answering questions about her father. She had been taught that this hesitation showed she was afraid. She would look down at her hands when Dr. Morrison asked if Daddy ever got angry. She had been taught that this body language proved she was scared to talk about it. Sometimes Daddy's voice gets really loud, Lily would whisper, exactly as Jessica had coached her. It makes me want to hide in my room. Dr. Morrison documented everything carefully. The child's behavior seemed consistent with someone who had witnessed domestic conflict. The hesitation, the fear, the way she seemed to shrink when talking about her father, these were all signs that professionals were trained to recognize. But Dr. Morrison was seeing a performance, not the truth. Lily wasn't afraid of her father. She was afraid of disappointing her mother. She wasn't remembering real events. She was repeating stories that Jessica had planted in her mind through weeks of careful manipulation. Tom's lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, tried his best to fight back against the mounting evidence. He was an experienced attorney who had handled many custody cases, but he had never seen such a thorough and convincing frame-up job. The problem is that Jessica has been very smart about this, Mr. Rodriguez explained to Tom during one of their meetings. She hasn't just made simple accusations. She's created a whole narrative with supporting evidence. The photos, the recordings, the diary entries, the child's testimony. It all fits together perfectly. But it's all fake, Tom protested. Every single piece of it is a lie. I believe you, Tom. But proving that in court is going to be extremely difficult. Jessica's story is consistent and detailed. She comes across as credible and sympathetic. And unfortunately, the court system tends to err on the side of protecting the child, which means believing the mother's claims. Mr. Rodriguez did his best to poke holes in Jessica's story. He pointed out that none of Tom's co-workers had ever seen him display violent behavior. He gathered character references from friends and neighbors who had known Tom for years. He even hired a private investigator to look into Jessica's gambling activities. But for every piece of evidence Mr. Rodriguez presented, Jessica's lawyer had a response. Tom's good behavior at work didn't prove anything about his behavior at home. Character references were just opinions from people who didn't really know what went on behind closed doors. And bringing up Jessica's gambling problem looked like victim blaming, trying to deflect attention from the real issue of domestic violence. The court-appointed guardian who was supposed to represent Lily's best interests interviewed both parents. Jessica performed beautifully during her interview, breaking down in tears as she described years of abuse. She showed the guardian her fake bruises and played the edited voice recordings. She talked about how she had tried to protect Lily but finally realized she had to get help. When the guardian interviewed Tom, he seemed defensive and angry, which was understandable since he was being falsely accused of horrible crimes. But his emotions were seen as evidence of the anger problems Jessica had described. When he tried to explain that Jessica was lying, it sounded like he was attacking the mother of his child. The guardian's report recommended that Tom's visitation rights remain suspended until he completed anger management counseling and psychological evaluation. The report stated that while Tom had not been convicted of any crimes, there was enough credible evidence to suggest that unsupervised contact with his daughter could be harmful. Tom read the report in his lawyer's office, and felt his world collapse completely. Even the person whose job it was to protect his daughter's interests believed Jessica's lies. How could he fight an entire system that was convinced he was guilty? "We're not giving up," Mr. Rodriguez said firmly. "This is just the first round. We'll appeal this decision, and we'll keep fighting until we get to the truth." But Tom was beginning to lose hope. He had spent almost all of his savings on legal fees. The stress was affecting his work performance, and his boss had started making comments about finding a replacement. Some days Tom wondered if it would be easier to just give up and disappear, to start a new life somewhere else where people didn't know his story. The only thing that kept him going was the thought of Lily. She was out there somewhere, probably confused and scared, being told lies about the father who loved her more than life itself. She needed him to keep fighting, even when everything seemed hopeless. But as the weeks dragged on and Jessica's lies became more elaborate and convincing, Tom began to realize that he might lose his daughter forever. The system that was supposed to protect children was being used as a weapon against him, and he was running out of ways to defend himself. Jessica had turned his love for his daughter into his greatest weakness, and she was using that weakness to destroy him completely. Lily had been living at her grandmother's house for 3 months now, and something didn't feel right. She missed her daddy terribly, but every time she mentioned wanting to see him, her mother would get that scared look in her eyes and start talking about how dangerous he was. "But Mommy," Lily would say, "Daddy never hurt me. He used to make me pancakes on Sunday mornings and read me stories before bed." "Sometimes people can change, sweetheart," Jessica would reply, pulling Lily close. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that make them do bad things even when they love you." Lily was confused. The daddy she remembered was gentle and kind. He would tickle her until she giggled so hard she couldn't breathe. He would carry her on his shoulders when they went to the park. He would help her with her homework and never got angry when she made mistakes. How could that same person be the scary man her mother kept talking about? At night, when she was supposed to be sleeping, Lily would hear her mother on the phone with lawyers and social workers. Jessica would talk about court dates and evidence and making sure Tom could never hurt them again. But Lily didn't understand what evidence meant or why there had to be court dates about her daddy. One afternoon, while Jessica was in the shower, Lily was playing in her grandmother's living room when she heard her mother's phone buzzing on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a text message from someone named Brian. Lily could read pretty well for a 9-year-old, and the message made her stomach feel funny. "Did you get the photos developed? The judge needs to see them next week." Lily didn't understand what photos Brian was talking about, but something about the message bothered her. She had heard her mother mention photos before, photos that showed how Daddy had hurt her. But when did someone take those photos? And who was Brian? Later that evening, after her grandmother had gone to bed, Lily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the text message and all the strange things that had been happening. She decided to explore her grandmother's house, something she had never done before. The house was old and full of creaky floors and dusty corners. Lily tiptoed through the hallways, feeling like a detective in one of her favorite books. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she felt like there were secrets hiding in this house, secrets that might help her understand why her life had changed so suddenly. She found her mother's temporary bedroom and carefully pushed open the door. Jessica was fast asleep, exhausted from another day of meetings with lawyers and social workers. Lily crept inside and looked around the room. Her mother's suitcases were lined up against the wall, still packed like they might leave at any moment. But it was the closet that caught Lily's attention. The door was slightly open, and she could see boxes stacked inside. One box was different from the others. It was smaller and had her name written on it in her mother's handwriting. Lily's heart started beating faster. What could be in a box with her name on it? She carefully pulled the box down from the shelf and sat on the floor with it. Inside, she found things that didn't make sense. There were photos of her mother with bruises on her face and arms, but Lily didn't remember her mother ever being hurt like that. There was a notebook filled with her mother's handwriting, talking about fights and arguments that Lily had never witnessed. But the most confusing thing was an old cell phone that Lily had never seen before. She pressed the power button and the screen came to life. The phone was full of text messages between her mother and someone named Brian. As Lily read through the messages, her hands started shaking. The kid is starting to ask too many questions about her dad. One message from Jessica read, "Just stick to the plan," Brian had replied. "Keep coaching her on what to say to the therapist. A few more weeks and this will all be over." "I feel bad about lying to her," Jessica had written back. "You're not lying. You're protecting her from finding out what kind of man her father really is," Brian responded. But the next message made Lily's world turn upside down. "I know Tom never actually hurt us," Jessica had written. "But he found out about the gambling and the money. I can't let him destroy my life. This is the only way." Lily read the message 3 times before it really sank in. Her mother was admitting that Daddy had never hurt them. All the stories about being scared, all the tears, all the reasons why she couldn't see her father. It was all made up. She kept reading, her heart pounding so loud she was afraid it might wake her mother. The messages revealed everything. Her mother had been gambling away their family's money. She had been lying to everyone, including the doctors and lawyers and judges. She had even been teaching Lily what to say to make it seem like Daddy was dangerous. Lily found photos on the phone that showed her mother hitting herself to create bruises. There were voice recordings where Jessica practiced crying and sounding scared. There was even a conversation where Brian helped Jessica plan out her fake diary entries, making sure the dates and details would seem believable to the courts. The worst part was finding messages where her mother talked about how to manipulate Lily's feelings. Jessica had written detailed plans about what to say to make Lily afraid of her father, how to reward her when she gave the right answers to the therapist, and how to make her feel guilty if she asked too many questions about wanting to see Daddy. "The kid loves her father too much," Jessica had written. "I need to break that bond before she gets old enough to see through the lies." Lily felt sick to her stomach. Her mother had been lying to her about everything. Daddy wasn't dangerous or scary. He was probably somewhere missing her just as much as she missed him. And all this time her mother had been pretending to be afraid while secretly planning to keep them apart forever. She found recordings of phone calls between her mother and Brian where they laughed about how easy it was to fool the social workers and therapists. They talked about Tom like he was stupid, like he deserved what was happening to him because he had discovered Jessica's gambling problem. "He actually thinks he can fight this in court," Jessica had said, laughing. "He has no idea how deep this goes. By the time I'm done, no one will ever believe a word he says." Lily had heard enough. She carefully put everything back in the box exactly as she had found it, but not before using her grandmother's old camera to take pictures of the most important messages and documents. She had learned about taking evidence from watching detective shows on TV, and she knew that she needed proof if anyone was going to believe her. Over the next few days, Lily became a different child. She stopped asking about her father because she didn't want her mother to get suspicious. She continued going to her therapy sessions with Dr. Morrison, but instead of repeating her mother's coaching, she started paying attention to what the doctor was really asking her. She began to understand that Dr. Morrison was trying to help her, but she was being lied to just like everyone else. Lily wanted to tell the truth, but she was scared. Her mother had told her that if she ever said anything different from their story, both of them could get in trouble with the law. But Lily was getting older and smarter every day. She realized that her mother was the one who should be in trouble, not her or her father. She started making plans of her own, just like her mother had done. She would find a way to tell the truth and bring her daddy home. The hardest part was pretending that nothing had changed. She had to act like she still believed her mother's lies, while secretly gathering evidence and planning how to expose the truth. Every day felt like she was living in 2 different worlds, the fake one her mother had created, and the real one where she knew her father was innocent. Lily was only 9 years old, but she was about to do something braver than most adults ever have to do. She was going to save her father and herself from her mother's web of lies, even if it meant standing up against the most important person in her life. The morning of the final custody hearing, Jessica stood in front of her mirror practicing her testimony one last time. She had rehearsed every word, every pause, every tear that would fall at just the right moment. Today was the day she would win everything. Tom would lose all rights to see Lily, and Jessica would be free to start a new life with Brian, the man who had helped her plan this entire scheme. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, adjusting her modest dress and checking that the makeup covering her latest fake bruises looked natural. "By tonight, this will all be over." Meanwhile, Tom sat in his car outside the courthouse, his hands shaking as he tried to prepare himself for what might be the last chance he would ever have to fight for his daughter. His lawyer, Mr. Rodriguez, had warned him that things didn't look good. Jessica's evidence was overwhelming, and the court was likely to terminate his parental rights completely. "I need you to stay calm in there," Mr. Rodriguez had told him earlier. "Don't let your emotions get the better of you. I know this is hard, but any outburst will just prove their point about your anger issues." Tom nodded, but inside he felt like he was dying. After today, he might never see Lily again. She would grow up believing her father was a monster, never knowing how much he loved her or how he had fought to stay in her life. Inside the courthouse, Lily sat quietly next to her court-appointed guardian, Mrs. Williams. She was wearing her best dress and had a small backpack clutched tightly in her lap. Nobody knew what was inside that backpack, but Lily had been planning this moment for weeks. Ever since she had discovered her mother's lies, Lily had been preparing. She had secretly made copies of the most important text messages using her grandmother's old camera. She had recorded some conversations between her mother and Brian using an old digital recorder she found in her grandmother's junk drawer. Most importantly, she had written down everything she could remember about how her mother had coached her to lie about her father. Lily was scared, but she was also determined. She knew that if she didn't speak up today, her daddy might disappear from her life forever. And she couldn't let that happen, not when she knew the truth. Judge Murphy called the court to order, and Jessica's lawyer began presenting their case. He painted a picture of Tom as a dangerous, violent man who had terrorized his family for years. He showed the fake photos of Jessica's bruises, played the edited voice recordings, and read excerpts from the fabricated diary. "Your Honor," Jessica's lawyer said dramatically, "this woman has suffered in silence for years, protecting her child from a man who cannot control his rage. The evidence is overwhelming and consistent. We ask the court to terminate Mr. Tom's parental rights permanently to ensure the safety of this innocent child." Then it was Jessica's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand with perfect posture, looking every inch the brave survivor she was pretending to be. Her voice was steady but emotional as she described years of alleged abuse that had never happened. "He would get so angry over the smallest things," Jessica said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I tried to hide it from Lily, but she saw too much. She started having nightmares, afraid that her father would hurt us both." Tom watched his wife lie under oath and felt his heart breaking. She was so convincing, so believable. If he didn't know the truth, even he might have believed her story. Jessica's testimony went on for an hour. She described fake incidents in perfect detail, complete with dates and specific quotes that she claimed to remember word for word. She talked about how Tom had isolated her from friends and family, how he had controlled their finances, how he had threatened to hurt her if she ever tried to leave. "I stayed for Lily's sake," Jessica concluded, her voice breaking. "I thought I could protect her, but I finally realized that the only way to keep her safe was to get away from him completely." When it was Mr. Rodriguez's turn to cross-examine Jessica, he did his best to poke holes in her story. But Jessica had prepared for every possible question. She had answers for everything, explanations that seemed logical and consistent with her narrative. "Mrs. Jessica," Mr. Rodriguez said, "isn't it true that you have a gambling addiction that cost your family their life savings?" "My husband likes to blame me for his financial problems," Jessica replied calmly. "But that's just another way he tries to control me. I made some poor investment decisions, but that doesn't give him the right to abuse his family." Even when confronted with evidence of her gambling, Jessica managed to turn it around and make herself look like the victim. She was that good at manipulation. As the morning dragged on, Tom began to lose hope. Jessica's performance was flawless. and it was clear that Judge Murphy was buying every word of it. When Mr. Rodriguez presented character witnesses for Tom, Jessica's lawyer dismissed them as people who didn't really know what went on behind closed doors. The court broke for lunch, and Tom barely touched his food. He felt like he was watching his life end in slow motion. When they returned for the afternoon session, Judge Murphy looked like he had already made up his mind. "Before I make my final ruling," Judge Murphy said, "I want to hear from the child's guardian about what arrangement would be in Lily's best interests." Mrs. Williams stood up and cleared her throat. "Your Honor, based on my interviews and observations, I believe that Lily has been traumatized by witnessing domestic violence. She shows clear signs of fear when discussing her father, and I recommend that his parental rights be terminated for her protection." Tom felt like the floor had fallen out from under him. Even the person whose job it was to protect his daughter believed Jessica's lies. But then something unexpected happened. As Judge Murphy was preparing to deliver what everyone assumed would be the final verdict, a small voice spoke up from the gallery. "Excuse me, Your Honor." Everyone turned to see Lily standing up, her backpack clutched in her hands. She looked tiny and scared, but there was something determined in her eyes that made the entire courtroom fall silent. "I need to tell you something important," Lily said, her voice getting stronger with each word. "My mommy has been lying about everything." Judge Murphy leaned forward, his eyebrows raised. "Young lady, this is very unusual. Mrs. Williams, did you know the child wanted to speak?" Mrs. Williams shook her head, looking confused. Jessica's face had gone pale, and she was whispering urgently to her lawyer. "Your Honor," Lily continued, walking toward the front of the courtroom, "I found proof that my mommy made up all the stories about my daddy. She never got hurt, and he never scared me. She taught me to lie to the doctors and to everyone." The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Judge Murphy banged his gavel for order and then looked at Lily with serious eyes. "That's a very serious accusation, young lady. Do you understand what you're saying?" Lily nodded and opened her backpack. "I have pictures and recordings that prove it. My mommy has been planning this whole thing with her boyfriend, Brian. They laughed about fooling everyone." She pulled out printed photos of text messages, a small digital recorder, and handwritten notes she had made. Judge Murphy called for an immediate recess and summoned both lawyers to his chambers along with Lily and Mrs. Williams. In the privacy of his office, Lily presented her evidence. The text messages clearly showed Jessica admitting that Tom had never hurt them and discussing how to coach Lily to lie. The recordings captured conversations between Jessica and Brian about their plan to frame Tom. Lily's notes detailed how her mother had taught her to act scared during therapy sessions. Judge Murphy examined everything carefully, his expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. When they returned to the courtroom, his demeanor had completely changed. "Mrs. Jessica," Judge Murphy said sternly, "you are accused of perjury, filing false police reports, and child endangerment. Through psychological manipulation, I am ordering an immediate investigation into these allegations." Jessica tried to maintain her composure, but her carefully constructed facade was crumbling. "Your Honor, that child has been manipulated by her father. This is exactly the kind of psychological abuse I've been trying to protect her from. But it was too late. The evidence was too clear, and everyone could see the truth now." Jessica's lies had finally caught up with her. Judge Murphy looked at Tom with something close to an apology in his eyes. "Mr. Tom, based on this new evidence, I am dismissing all charges against you and awarding you full custody of your daughter. Furthermore, I am recommending that the district attorney pursue criminal charges against Mrs. Jessica for her false accusations." Tom couldn't believe what he was hearing. After months of hell, his daughter had saved them both with her courage and determination. As the gavel came down, Lily ran across the courtroom and threw herself into her father's arms. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered through her tears. "I should have told the truth sooner." Tom held his daughter tight, his own tears flowing freely. "You were so brave, sweetheart. You saved us both." Jessica was led away in handcuffs, her perfect plan destroyed by the very person she had tried to manipulate. The little girl she had underestimated had proven to be stronger and braver than anyone could have imagined. As Tom and Lily walked out of the courthouse together, hand in hand. They knew they had a long road ahead of them. There would be therapy to help heal from the trauma Jessica had caused.